Derevi, the Imperial Practitioner, is an old school commander that's been around for quite a while. She used to be a pretty decent commander overall, but over time she has been power creeped out of this format. And currently, as you can see, she doesn't perform that well. But there's been a big update, and that's the One Ring. It costs 4 mana, you can tap it to put a burden counter on it, and then draw cards equal to amount of burden counters, which means that you're increasing the draws each turn when you untap on your untap phase. However, with Derevi, you can untap this a lot of times. And that more or less means that every time you connect with a creature, you get to activate the One Ring again. And that can spiral out of control really fast. The synergy is beautiful. And if we take a look at the One Ring's individual performance from a total of 5,341 decks, you have 2,165 decks that have played with the One Ring, and you can see in this pie chart that's an inclusion rate about 40%. That is 40% of tournament decks that have gone into tournaments with the One Ring inside their deck list. And those are getting an average win rate together of 22.15. Indicating that the One Ring seems to be working out in a good favor. It's doing a good job, so like increasing your chance of winning the match. And this is even without the synergy of Derevi inside the deck as well. You could even push up the win rate a little bit more by increasing synergy. For example, Minamu at Schools at Water's Edge. Untap target legendary permanent, so you can untap your One Ring. Good! And then when you look at decks that are playing both the One Ring and Derevi inside the same deck list, we're getting an average win rate of 23.81. Now this is not using Derevi as the commander, this is just having both of these two cards inside the 99. But the indication seems to be that we are having a potential upgrade for Derevi here. So the One Ring is good, but how do we win? We could play a lot of stacks cards, I guess. That's usually what Derevi have been doing these days, so you play these flying hate-bear creatures like Aven Mindcensor or Hush Bringer, and then you connect phase, get Derevi triggers, and in this case you would untap the One Ring to draw an enormous amount of cards, while these hate-bears are shutting down your opponents. So you're converting these hate-bears into value engines as well. That is one way of going forward. And we do have a lot of potential hate-bears with some various abilities that we could have inside this deck to shut down our opponents and make sure that they're not getting to play this game. While we even have some that could be beneficial for you as well. And the cool thing about stacks is that you have so many different things that they are targeting, so depending on what form of metagame you need to deal with, you can have various cool effects that are affecting your opponents in various different forms. What I mean is, you can tweak your deck to attack what specifically you need to shut down. But there is a problem. Some of these cards aren't really that good. Like, decks that have them in them aren't performing great. For example, this Hush Bringer have 112 decks that have entered into it with tournaments, and they have achieved a 15.87% win rate. Now, some of them are actually pretty okay. For example, we have Laviniasaurus Renegade with 524 decks that have entered into it, basically an inclusion rate of somewhere around 10%, and they are getting an average win rate together of 23.48. So the annoying answer is that you should play good stacks cards and not the bad ones. But what are the good ones? Well, that's up for you to basically decide. For example, do you think this is a good or bad stacks cards? Like, the win rate isn't that terrible, 21.53. Linvala, Keeper of Silence, 18.65. Edis1 Canonist, 19.09. Aven Mindcensor, 19.17. Archon of Emeria, 19.53. So that might give you a small picture of where stacks currently is. The verdict is basically don't play too many of them, play the ones that usually have a big impact. But there are more cool strategies we could go for example, extra turns. The idea here is to basically cast Nexus of Fate or one of your other extra turns. This will untap the One Ring. Extra turns are usually great with the One Ring, and extra turns Derevi the One Ring, now we're cooking. Because once your extra turn spell resolve, you will draw into another extra turn spell with a huge amount of draw effects you have from this setup. And then you just continue your road downwards until you basically draw out your entire library. And your win condition here could be Beacon of Tomorrow or potentially Nexus of Fate. Both of these goes back into your library. Now, by the way, you have to bounce the One Ring back to your hand so you don't actually die to the burden counters. But you're still going to have infinite turns from this point. If Nexus of Fate is the only card inside your entire library, you have infinite turns. Now you can decide for yourself how good you think the Nexus of Fate actually is, but I would like to point out that the very low inclusion rate, we only have 59 decks that have Nexus of Fate in them, and the average win rate among those is 20.30. So it's not terrible, but it's not like dominating. But I wouldn't be against someone actually playing Nexus of Fate inside their Derevi the One Ring deck, but maybe that's enough. You could absolutely play more. But I think that the verdict is that you should stay on a very safe balance. Now some of you might say that that spell is really expensive, but remember, Derevi actually untaps your lands, so if you really want to cast it, you can just untap various lands you have, like your Cradle, and then, yeah, you can basically afford that thing quite easily. But there is another combo I really want to showcase. This is Derevi, Emil and Gaia's Cradle. Now Derevi is already the commander and Gaia's Cradle is auto-included basically. And that means you only need to add Emil the Blessed, which is actually kinda good with Derevi on its own, because activating Emil will give you a Derevi trigger. Now the cool thing here is that if you have Gaia's Cradle in play and it taps for 4, you can have infinite green, and with infinite green and these two cards together, you can have infinite untaps and infinite tap downs. This means that you have infinite mana, but you don't really have anything to do from infinite mana with Derevi in the command zone, unless you have something in your hand that can win from infinite mana. But personally, I don't really need that. Because once again, you can actually tap down all of your opponents. So you pass turn, tap down everything, your opponent will untap, but before draw, you generate infinite mana again and you tap him down completely. So then he draws a card for turn, he's tapped down, he plays a land, he goes to combat, you generate infinite mana again, you tap down that land, that opponent passes turn, and you rinse and repeat. You will lock down your opponents to be infinitely tapped down. Now they do have a chance to actually break this because they could have instant speed spot removal, but once again you could have like a lot of counter spells to back you up. But if you also have some of these creatures in play, it's gonna be kinda tricky for them to potentially cast some of their counter spells. What I'm saying here, it's not a combo that absolutely wins, but it's a combo that usually takes over the match. Now I have to point out that the win rate you're looking here, 24.94, are usually because this combo is heavily played inside Thrasius decks and cEDH decks. But it's an easy include for your Derevi, and it's actually a pretty good board state to be in once you achieved this lock. In the end, I wanna say this: if you end up drawing a lot of cards, you can win in any shape or form. Like, the goal is to get to this specific position. Tutor for the One Ring, not that hard, and Lycan Tutor in white can find the One Ring, and then you have a lot of various blue tutors to find the artifact. And then you get your Derevi into play. By the way, you should begin by finding the One Ring and getting the One Ring to play, because the One Ring is a very good card individually on its own. Finding Derevi is just your secondary the One Ring, and then every single creature afterwards is your third, fourth, fifth the One Ring. But there's one more thing I would like to highlight inside this video, and that's counter spells. So I've mentioned that stacks struggle sometimes to seal the deal. Well, counter spells don't. Now there are obviously some counter spells that aren't recommended, like negate. It's not great. Delay is fine, 21.20 average win rate, it's okay. I think miscast is a worthy consideration. Still, now the win rate is in red, but it's not that terrible. Glen Alendra is actually perfect. It's a flying creature that will work with your Derevi, but also be a counterspell at the ready when you need it. Days is actually amazing. There's a lot of situations where you really need those free to cast counterspells, and just making the spell cost 1 more could really seal the deal. Some players might be looking at Spellstutter Sprite, which is like kinda perfect in the concept. It's a flying creature. That's exactly what we want to have with Derevi. So this is gonna be your third, the One Ring, and it can counterspell something at CMC 1. I mean, I'm not gonna be that angry with the card. It has an 11.32 win rate in total average, so terrible. But still, there's a potential synergy here, so just because you're seeing some numbers here that is in red, don't be afraid to test it anyways. Because I really think that this is the big message. In the end, if you can draw a lot of cards, you can win in any shape or form. Just play good cards that you think are gonna work out fine, that are gonna synergize with each other. How much the One Ring is going to increase Derevi's win rate over time is a good question. But it's definitely a huge upgrade and a add naus for Derevi in the end. What does add naus do? Drawing a lot of cards and losing you a lot of life. What will the One Ring do? Draw a lot of cards and lose you a lot of life. Derevi has been around for ages, and it's a very cool bounded commander, and I'm happy that the One Ring got printed and gave this commander a potential boost. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching.